My name is Craig Picken. I'm an executive recruiter. More than a decade ago, I started my practice for one purpose: to use my experience as a former military aviator, business jet sales executive, and P&L leader to help aviation and aerospace companies and their executives be fast, adaptable, and strategic. I do these podcasts to inspire and inform, but more importantly, they are a focused platform to help business leaders grow. Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. Welcome back. I am very happy to have Jason Anderson with me. Jason is a former Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, C-130 pilot, I believe.
Yep.
He is with now with Collins Aerospace, Raytheon Technologies. What is it? What is that company called now? Is it Collins Raytheon Technologies?
It's Collins Aerospace, which is a Raytheon Technologies company.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
It's taken on so many renditions in the last couple of years. Even I get confused. So
absolutely.
But you and I met a couple of years ago. It was interesting. When did we met a couple of years ago? We were talking about kind of transitioning military veterans. I was doing a blog trying to help military veterans ease the transition. And then you and I got connected and we started talking about it. So you now have got your new company, your new venture that you're starting. It's pretty exciting stuff. So it's called PreVeteran. So Jason is the founder and president of PreVeteran, and he's got a great program to help military veterans enter the civilian workforce. But a lot of the stuff he's doing, which fascinates me, is not just military to civilian. I think it could be, really, and it's not just veterans to civilian, but it's also helping businesses hire veterans easier. But a lot of it also just comes into, great career management for whoever wants to listen. I mean, really, it's some great advice for anybody ever looking to make a career change or wants to grow their career. So talk to us about what you're doing, Jason. Welcome.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I want you to know this is my first podcast. So this isn't the first one I've done ever, but it is the first one since we've relaunched PreVeteran, which was about 2.5 months ago. Okay. So we're super excited to be with you, and thanks for all the kind words on that. It was, I want to say, a couple of years ago. I think I was in Asia at the time, or I just moved back to Wyoming with the recent merger, one of the mergers with Collins Aerospace. And we started talking about transition. At that time, my concepts were being kind of sorted out for PreVeteran. And there was a lot of research that kind of went into it. In fact, years of research. And the reason why it took so long is, frankly, the existing research body or the entire work of research out there is pretty kind of fragmented. So you're going to have these different kind of either nonprofits or VA funded studies that are out there, and they're kind of all over the board. Some come from just different think tanks, some come from universities, but it was really hard to kind of get a picture of what's going on in the transitioning military space. So I was kind of frustrated with it. So what I ended up doing is just kind of taking all this research and putting a lot of critical thought into it, and then coming up with a single operating picture so people can understand that. I've since labeled that as the state of transition. I haven't put it out there publicly yet, but I think I gave you a little peek at that the other day. But what I think is useful about it, like you were saying, is it kind of informs all of our programs moving forward. It's just a way to look at transition at one holistic area across 4 different measures, which is employment, wellness, higher education, and entrepreneurship, to see how well or not well veterans are performing in those 4 measures.
Well, it's a government program. So let's just talk. Yours is not a government program, but
right.
The military has transition assistance, and it's a government program. And there's nothing worse than a bunch of government workers who have never really experienced the civilian workforce try to instruct, exiting military people on career management moving forward. And quite frankly, the worst people at transitioning are senior officers. They're clueless. It becomes an afterthought to them. It's like, the cliff is coming. You see the end of the tracks, and they wait until the day before. They're like, oh, maybe I need to give this some thought.
Yeah.
They have no clue what they want to do. They have no idea. It's like, I'll just figure it out.
Yeah.
But you talk about that a lot in your program.
I do, and the phenomenon you're talking about. So TAP, I've been through it. Everybody now has to go through it. It's congressionally mandated as of 2012, as part of the Vow to Hire Heroes Act of 2011 that was passed. What is interesting about that, though, and I try not to beat up TAP too much, because the way I kind of address it with my audience is, TAP is a requirement. So the government is doing the best it can to get all the people in the military out of the military. And therefore, by definition, it's a single kind of monolithic program.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't reach the level of individual specificity that individuals require. So at the end of the day, it's never going to meet an individual's needs. And, when I talk to people about this, and I kind of look back at my own TAP experience, what it was is it was a little bit painful, because I would sit there and listen intently to what they're saying, and I could only glean like 2 to 3% of information that was actually germane to my
Mm-hmm.
individual situation. The rest was just honestly a lot of noise, and just sitting there and trying to have to think, wait for that one moment when you heard something, you're like, I need that. And having hours go by and days go by before those little kind of insights actually hit you. You know what I mean? But so I want to show you, I actually have modeling, if it would be good for you to kind of take a look at, and the audience, which kind of explains exactly what you were talking about. So let me jump over to this computer real quick here. Before I do that, let me kind of set the stage. So as I was going through this kind of transformation of my own transition, which by all measures was successful, there's reasons for that I did right. There's some of it that's just luck, but I did do some things right. As I was looking back, and as I had moved to Asia and moved into a more executive role for the company, I was still kind of very interested to figure out why mine was successful, why others was not successful. And that's what kind of took me down this journey. And then I eventually found you. And I tried to find answers. And like I told you, I went through all the research, different studies. I couldn't find answers. So I started kind of making my own modeling. And it kind of took me down the route of sociology, psychology, anthropology. I mean, any kind of academic discipline you could come up with. I thought through it, I ruled it out, and then I finally landed on neuroscience. And the reason why I landed on neuroscience is there is nothing more fundamental on earth that we're aware of anyway, that is how your brain processes information to make your individual experience. So to me, that analysis made more sense than anything I had seen before. So as transitioning, you're going through as an individual. Therefore, how you think and operate within the external environment is very critical. So I designed a model based on that. So hold on a second, I'll pull it up for you. So again, I landed on cognitive neuroscience because there's nothing more individual about how an individual person's brain interacts with the external environment. That made a lot of sense to me. And obviously there's a lot of that going on with military transition. So in order for this model to make sense, I have to kind of run you through some basic neuroscience, very high level stuff. It's not complex, but it's really important for context. So when we talk about your brain's purpose, and then this will be weaved into a couple slides after this, it won't take more than about 10 minutes. So when you look at your brain's purpose, there's more, but you can break it down to 6 major kind of functions. One is it ensures your survival. Second, it provides you individualized support through life. It does that by creating memories, which is called encoding, and then retrieving them later, which is retrieval. Efficiency is paramount for your brain. And despite its small size, it eats a ton of energy, up to 20, 30% of your energy stores to get that thing to work properly. And then it's very adept at making associations. So with that as a contextual backdrop, let me kind of take you to the next slide here. So this is my model. This is the one I created after hiring a neuroscientist for almost a year, and then worked with her to understand basic cognitive neuroscience principles. So these are things that are very known within the cognitive neuroscience realm, but I've broken them down so that individuals can use it. You don't have to go to a practitioner. You can do more kind of understanding what's going on in your mind, and that's the value of this model. So here's how it goes, and I'll make this, we're not going to go through the whole thing. It can get complex, so I'll take you through just a few of these.
Okay.
So it's a 3-step. The first step is your brain. Important information enters your brain. And what I mean by that is that's information that enters your brain or is allowed to. Because if you think about the physical environment, they say there could be like 7 million bits of information that are trying to enter your brain, from what the lighting's like to what the sounds are to what different things are. And what gets in is what you give attention to. And the attention in this case is usually externally driven by somebody who you trust, like a parent or a drill sergeant in the case of the military, who says you must do this, so you do it. Or internally driven through someone who says, hey, I want to change something in my life, and it's important enough that gets up into step 2. So once it gets to step 2, that information that was just let in sits in short-term memory very briefly. And then your brain has mechanisms in it that search your brain's long-term memories for associated information to that incoming information. And then those two are merged together from step 2 to step 3. It's called consolidation. Push forward to your prefrontal cortex here in the front, where you can think much deeper about it. And once you do that, not surprisingly, that arrow that's underneath the head there, that influences how you see the external environment. It influences, if it makes sense, you begin trying to seek cues in the external environment that meet your thinking that you're doing internally. So
Okay.
with that as a backdrop, and tell me if I'm going too deep here, but what that does is it profoundly impacts people very specifically with transition. So let's do the transition very specific example here. So let's take you, Craig. Back in the day, you're like, hey, I got to get out of the military. What do I do? So step 1 meets that criteria. It's important to you. There's big lifestyle change. So it gets into step 2, and this is where all of the confusion and everything, all the conflict kind of takes place in step 2. And like I told you before, and I know I'm going through this quick, but there's a lot of information there. It sits in short-term memory, and then there's mechanisms in your brain that look for long-term associated memory. So within that context, you actually have a spectrum of memory. And I have 2 new words for kind of the transition space that I want them to start using, because it helps with the context so much.
Mm-hmm.
So on one end of the memory spectrum, Craig Picken had no memory of transitioning from the military. So not surprisingly, you had no long-term associated memories. And we
You don't know what you don't know, essentially.
You don't know what you don't know.
What you don't know.
Exactly, right? Now, going back to the brain and what the attributes are, that doesn't mean your brain stops working. In fact, it actually puts it in more of a crisis. And what your brain does is try to deliver solutions to your problem. So what happens in this case for military people is they get all these really good ideas. Hey, should I go get my 3rd and 4th degree? Should I go get my PMP? Should I get my Sigma 6? I mean, everything, right? And what's objective about that is if you kind of take a step back and you go, holy crap, that's like a hugely like gunshot burst of ideas. Are any of them really practical? So did you have an experience like that by chance?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're like, I don't know what you're jumping out. And this is a lot of people, not just, military people, but a lot of people with career, transition goals in general. It's like, they've been 20 years at the same company.
Yep.
I don't know what it's like to get out to go do something different. It's, you don't know what you don't know. So you're looking at like, when I was jumping out, I was like, well, I was a naval flight officer. Do I want to go be a school teacher? Well, why not? Well, that sounds cool. Do I want to go do this? And you literally, for me, I had to sit down and go, okay, it was a very thoughtful process for me. I love to read. And I was like, I'm in aviation. I live in Europe now. I'm in aviation. My college degree was international trade and economics. Well, wait a minute. Okay, I'm living in Europe, international trade and economics, and I'm an aviation guy. Why don't I look at something in the business of aviation? So that's how I took my process. But it's definitely hear people all over the place, because what do I do next? It's a completely foreign environment to them.
Exactly. Now here's what's interesting. So there is a memory spectrum. And what I kind of want to show you on this next slide is what are the consequences of this. So we talked about the brain gap. And again, I'd love people to start using these terms because it makes so much sense. When you have a brain gap, what that essentially means is you stop your cognitive cycle and you're unable to think about what to do for transition and unable to think.
Right.
And it's reflected in all the literature from particularly USC and their School of Social Sciences. People say, there's a veil in my mind, I can't get past it. And I'm saying or claiming that the brain gap is precisely why that's happening. You're unable to complete a cognitive cycle. Now, on the other side of the spectrum is the military mindset heuristic. Now, I have to give you a definition of a heuristic. A heuristic is really a shortcut in your mind because you have so much experience in a certain area. Information comes in, it instantly goes to that heuristic and you arrive at a conclusion quickly. This gets back to that attribute in your brain of being efficiency is paramount. So let's talk real quick about how that plays out specifically in transition. So here we go. So I just got done writing an article, and I know this is going to hurt some feelings, but frankly, we need to be a little more precise, I think, when talking about transition. And what I don't want to do is, point fingers at people specifically. I want them to know that there's actually these mechanisms in their mind that are creating obstacles to their transition. It's not them. Their mind is actually functioning exactly like it's supposed to. It's just they're not aware of these obstacles because this discussion hasn't taken place in the transition space yet. So when we talk about how this impacts your transition and its planning, we talk about the left side of the spectrum, brain gap, the right side, which is based on a ton of military memory. Here's the consequence of that. And I label it ignorance and hubris, right? And if you kind of take a step back and you look at that, that's literally the worst position you could be in, is where you don't know what you don't know, but you think you know everything, or you think you'll be okay with no plan. And if I'm not mistaken, you kind of articulated that a minute ago when we were talking about you and some senior officers out there. But I argue it spans the entire age, rank spectrum. But I certainly think your point that you brought up is valid. So here's the impact. So I just said with the brain gap, because you have no long-term memory, you can't see a clear path forward and your mind is flooded with great ideas, right? On the other side, the military mindset heuristic, here you go. The top one that you already mentioned, thinking you can figure it out on your own. And I have a little asterisk there that takes you to the bottom left that says, even though you've never done it before. I mean, that's kind of true, right? The military does build up that confidence, but the thing that I think people are missing when they say they could figure it out on their own, the assumption is totally out of bed with reality, because I use a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when I say that, when you're in the military, you have a full triangle. You've got your basic needs, your safety needs, and then you've got your kind of professional needs, and they're all built out on a normal Maslow's. Well, the second you step foot out of the military, unless you're retired, which retirement money is not enough, and then if you've separated, you have no money, your safety needs just went kaput, right? So so now you're being brought down on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you start going into panic mode a little bit, which is very predictable. So why not preemptively do that, which is what PreVeteran is all about. So the next couple of things I'll go through: overvaluing your generalist attributes. That is shown everywhere, whether, I have people contacting me all the time. Hey, just put me anywhere. Like you were saying, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And it couldn't be any more different than what the private sector needs, which is a very specific individual with a very specific skill set to fit a specific role in the company that runs the P&L, And then I'll finish up here. The private sector should accommodate you. For some reason, they think that. And then thinking you should get things for free. And I have two asterisks over there that go to the left, where that's not how the private sector works. And then unusual future salary calculations. So again, this military mindset kind of doesn't help that way. And just to kind of do a humorous anecdote, you probably heard too. When I interview the hundreds of people I've interviewed that are transitioning, I say, what's your entry point for salary calculation? And it's two camps only. The separating camp says, I don't want to make less than I make now. 99.9% of the time they say those words. The retired folks are really different, because what they say is, well, I'll take a lesser salary in my future job if the combination of that salary and my retirement pay are not less than I make now.
Mhm.
So there's no wonder that they kind of look at military people and go, I have no idea what they're thinking. I mean, it's just such an unusual influence that is brought over from the military. But my
Yeah.
argument is none of this is obviously helpful, so that's the point we're trying to get across is in pre-veteran, this model underpins our entire system, where we want to show them these obstacles that are in their head, and once they can
Mhm.
identify them, it lowers them, and then they're more receptive to learn what is actually really important out there.
But you think about like what you're doing here, and this is where I want to get away from it's a great thing for veterans, but when you think about like people who are transitioning, or when you think about transitioning, not just from the military, but say from their company, they just got fired,
Yep.
they just got laid off, um, or whatever, their job is no longer there. They're at the left side of your graph. They can't see
Yep.
the path forward. They've got a gajillion great ideas, and then it's like, oh crap mode hits, and they're way at the left. And once again, 99% of the people who get laid off or fired or transitioned out of their current job were never preparing for it, for
Yep.
whatever reason. They never thought it would happen to them. And then you come over to the right and they're doing the same thing. Hey, it's okay. I'll just figure it out as I go along. They don't have a pre-planned plan.
Yep.
They don't know what their value is in the market because they really haven't looked. And this is kind of why this model you've got is actually much more valuable than just for transitioning veterans. It's for a whole lot of, it's for a whole thousands of people out there to help them sort of, create that plan for, what if this does happen to me? Why, what should be my path forward at any given day, type of deal.
Exactly.
So it
Now,
really does. It really plays. I mean, I'm looking at this. I'm going, oh wow, there's a lot of value this for a lot of people.
I appreciate that. What ends up happening, and I agree with you. I mean, we're exploring kind of adjacencies outside of that. We see a
Mhm.
lot. Right now, I'm working with, since I'm a Wyoming resident, live in Jackson Hole, we're working with the University of Wyoming to begin adopting this model for a workforce initiative statewide. So
Mhm.
it's really kind of exciting opportunities that are taking place right now. And I appreciate you kind of noticing that it's got, broader legs than just military, because here's what happens as a result of this. Um, they spin their wheels with no assurance that whatever they're doing is going to work. And I think once you can convince them of that,
Right.
I think life gets good, because here's the alternative, right? The alternative is this. I wrote about this in one of my initial articles, but you go through this,
Mhm.
it's called the emotional cycle of change.
Mhm.
And if you don't address your internal obstacles we just went through, and there's more depth to that, that's just the higher level stuff, you're going to resign yourself to go through the ups and downs. And
Mhm.
I think me and you had talked about this before, but this is where I get really frustrated with the veteran advocates out there who insist upon the fact that you have to struggle in your transition. I completely disagree with that. I could not disagree more.
Mhm.
All I'm saying is there had not been a model there before that allows you to get from stage 1 to stage 4 without going through the huge ups and downs. And
Mhm.
and that's kind of where we're going with this, because I got to show you this last slide for today. But think about how this plays into the broader, not just individual, but the aggregate veteran market, right?
Mhm.
When you talk about the civil military divide, there's a lot of articles out there that discuss, wow, we just do not see things the same way.
Mhm.
And I kind of centered this around that graph that I told you about, where I do 4 measures: employment, wellness, higher education, entrepreneurship. If you look at this graph right here, what's circled, it's that the retention of transitioning military members, once they actually get a job, which is hard, by the way, they
Mhm.
actually leave the job 4 times faster than our general public counterparts, right? 4 times.
Mhm.
And if you look at the numbers, right, from a company standpoint, they're spending at least $5,000 to get you in the door. And I mean, that's the
Mhm.
minimum, whether it's internal or external recruiting. And then once you leave after you've been trained, it's anywhere from 50% to 200% of your salary to replace you. These are real dollars for the company, and the company is always looking for talent. So I argue the veteran talent pool, I mean, we've got affirmative action, we've got tax credits, we've got preferential hiring in the government. Every lever in the world is being pulled right now for the veteran demographic. And I argue they're going to go to other talent pools. They are. And that's kind of the danger we're facing right now, because I think we can cure the military or the civil military divide by letting the individual transitioning person know they have to do two things. And this is the cornerstone of PreVeteran. They must self-transform. Must. It is not an option. They are going from less than 1% of the US population, decreasing year over year, into a 93%, which is non-veteran population. And you can kind of see, if we think we can carry over everything and not transform, it's going to be a rough go, and you're going to find out you're going to have to transform anyway in order to integrate to the normal kind of general public way of life. So when you look just at this graphic, this kind of spells out the civil military divide. You got the transitioning military person saying the private sector doesn't value me, doesn't understand me. And then the business people over here and the general public, the 93%, look at us leaving 4 times faster than everyone else and says, why are they such a problem?
Right.
So it's a challenge, but I think the only,
as I have to explain to a lot of transitioning people, and the more senior they are, the worse they are, to be honest with you. I say, look, at the end of the day, corporate America doesn't care about your leadership. They don't care about a lot of things. They don't care about your can-do attitude. They don't care about your leadership. They want to make money. And there's only 2 questions that's going through their mind. Can this guy make me money, or can this guy save me money?
Yep.
And realistically, if it comes back to, can this guy save me money? It's really a loop that goes back to saving money is increasing profits. So it just comes back to, can this guy make me money? Yep. So when you think about someone transitioning over, it's the only value is going into an interview or going to a company is, here's how I can help you make money. It's not, here's how I can improve your leadership. It's not, here's how I can just get stuff done. It's, here's how my can-do attitude, good leadership, and ability to get stuff done will improve your profit margin in this specific arena. So it's really not a complex, it's not a complex question. It's just one that that's misunderstood. People don't understand it. It's kind of like cricket. I don't know what the game of cricket's all about. But people are coming into the world with, cricket, if that makes sense. And, thinking I'm going to go play cricket. And you're like, well, nobody knows what the hell the rules of cricket are. So why, so why do it? Yeah.
Awesome point. And the only thing, I'm in violent agreement with you, by the way, when you're either saving them money or you're making them money. I just wrote an article about that last couple of weeks, where, they don't value your leadership unless you can do your job. And then if you can do your job, the role that you've been assigned to do, then you can, exhibit your leadership and actually flourish. Because, the same information I just told you that paints a pretty dire picture for the first 2 years after transition really gets better. I mean, once they do figure it out and figure out they got to transform, because no one has told them that, certainly not the researchers, because they want to apply baby gloves to the veterans and not offend them and make sure that, you should never challenge a veteran. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You're disarming them of the ability to get better, because it's actually could be a phenomenal talent pool. Once they actually are self-transformed and aligned to the private sector, they actually can do excellent work. And I think they become great employees. And frankly, that's what we want to do at PreVeterans, make better veterans. I mean, our goal down the road is to get more people into our ecosystem. And once they start going through our courses, we're very confident that we're going to have companies that will want that much more aligned talent to go into their company, because then we could have them retain at much higher
Yep.
percentages,
But I think on the flip side too, companies too, it's like, hey, look, you hire let's just say you hire a junior officer or mid-career, maybe, major lieutenant colonel or major lieutenant commander, lieutenant, Navy lieutenant, Air Force captain, Marine Corps captain. And you're taking somebody who's anywhere from 4 to 10 years in the military. So they're, let's just say they're 30 years old. And you're doing them a favor by saying, hey, look, come in. Here's the new expectation. We know where you were, or we sort of think we know where you were. Here's the new world. Here's sort of the politics of the organization. You knew the politics of the organization in the military. You just didn't step on the skipper's shoes. You didn't undermine your boss ever. Well, quite frankly, in corporate America, you may come to your boss and you may challenge him. And you go, that is the stupidest decision I've ever seen, and here's why. And you challenge your boss. Politically, what's what's politically, maybe, you come into an organization. I think it's good that companies help these people who really don't understand, these veterans who really, hey, it's a whole new game for them. And you say, okay, look, here's how it works here. No offense, Joe, here's how it works here. And we know you flew $100 million airplane and you did it great, but the Xerox copier is off hands to you, and it's no offense, but you got to get, that's the problem, is that, like, you get somebody who's coming out of, some 28-year-old youngster, I think, 28 years old. And then all of a sudden you're saying, hey, don't turn on the copy machine. You're not qualified. Like, wait a minute, So it's sort of a realignment of expectations. And I think you got to help people realign those expectations too.
I agree with you, but I guess one of my bigger problems with TAP, going back to where we started, is it's been around for 30 years. I have data from 30 years that show it doesn't work. I actually have one study that says people who went through TAP do worse. That was from back in 2008. It's funny, but it's not funny, because it's permeated into the minds of the organization and the DoD in general. And even though with those bad outcomes, it's been baked literally into the minds. Now it's congressionally mandated, despite not having good performance out of that. So I know that we've got a tough road to hoe with PreVeteran, because we're going, business to consumer. We're trying to begin filling out the space with a completely different way of doing things. But kind of going back to your comment you just had, I think you can do I know you can do that alignment now before you get out, because I wrote another article where TAP, the current transition system, it has you get ready for your transition in descent. And I say that, of course, metaphorically, you're in career descent. And what I mean by that is your workload triples. Not only are you doing your job and have your family obligations, the next layer is you're disentangling yourself from the military. So you're attending a ton of briefings, you're attending, you're getting your clearance read out from your clearance, you're doing all these different things. Mostly the medical and dental take most of the time, and making sure you get your VA records, all this. And then on top of that, you're supposed to figure out who you are, what you want to do, where you want to work. And it's flawed by design. So what we want to do with PreVeteran is get people in their straight and level metaphorical career, where they're busy, they're doing their job, which is always the first thing we talk about. Is your first obligation is to the taxpayer, because they're paying your salary. But just like any professional development or something you want to do personally, we want you to fit PreVeteran into your busy life. And that's why our courses are designed that way. Our courses are designed to be hybrid courses. And what that means is, it's a learning management system, which means typically our courses now are 5 weeks long, and you're going to go through 20 to 40 minutes of videos, and then you're going to have a live Zoom call. And then after that, you're going to have assignments, but you could fit that into your busy schedule, which is why we're trying to get people 1 to 3 years prior to them actually leaving the military. Because You need to fit it into their busy life cycle. That's what everyone in the world does now.
Mhm.
And why would you put yourself behind the 8 ball in career descent to do all these different things and self-transform? It just, there's no time.
But that's, but going back to my civilian thing, that's, the great thing with the veteran thing, like, so what I tell veterans is this: from the day you graduate from flight school, whatever, we were aviators. So I'm like, you should be having conversations with business leaders and networking with them. And it's like, no expectations. Just tell me what you do once a year, twice a year, once a week, your neighbor, let's go to coffee. In the civilian world, too many people don't think about a career transition until they're being transitioned.
Yep.
Their job went away. Well, why didn't you go to conferences? Well, my boss never paid for them. Well, you got money. Yeah. Go buy your own, go pay for your own career, your career thing.
Yep.
Why didn't you go network with a company, or why didn't you take an interview once a year just to see what your value was in the marketplace? So, this is life though. It's like, not just military life, but it's life in general. It's career and personal management. Yeah.
That, I mean, that's so spot on. And it kind of brings up a few kind of thoughts I've been having with different kind of transitioning people. When you were talking about how they're addressing kind of the workforce and new jobs and things like that, you're right. Never had to interview for a job, really. I mean, there's probably a couple exceptions out there, but they never have. So they, of course, don't have that skill. And then when you talk about investing in yourself, I've got a couple funny stories, right? I mean, anyone in the private sector spends money, and they do it knowing that they're making a value decision. You go, hey, is this worth it? I'll pay for it. If it isn't, I won't. But for some reason, veterans take offense to that. I don't get it. Like I have this conversation with people all the time, because my courses are not free, and my courses cost money for a good reason. I need you to prioritize what you're doing. I will not have you do this training and do it the same way you did in the military, where you're kind of half there and kind of not. That will not lead to the outcomes we're looking for. But I ask these same people, I go, so are you hung up on pain? And they're like, well, a little bit, yeah. And I'm like, well, let's do this scenario. Let's say you have a daughter who's 14 and is struggling in math because we're in COVID right now. Would you get her a tutor? Well, of course I'd get her a tutor, And then, hey, what about your son? He's showing promise as a baseball player, but the town baseball team sucks, and you want to get him on a travel team, and it's like $800. Of course I'd get him that. I don't want to deny him that opportunity. And then you go, you're the breadwinner in your family. You're the breadwinner. You're the one. All these other expenses go away because you have no money, and for whatever reason you're unwilling to pay for you as the breadwinner. You're taking on the most risk. And I go back to the ignorance and hubris thing. It is real, and it just fits into that.
It's a function of, if you're not willing to invest in yourself, why should I invest in you?
Totally.
That's a great, that to me, it's like, I did a podcast on this a while back, and it's like, if you really want to advance your career, go to 2 conferences a year. Your boss won't pay. Look, a conference costs $500 to $1,000, plane ticket, hotel. It's $2,000, but everybody's there who you want to meet. Trust me, everybody's, you'll find a great conference, not a trade show, but a great conference, and everybody's there you want to meet. If you're a military guy and you're thinking that you want to be, an executive in aerospace or an executive in pharma, why wouldn't you just pay to go to a conference and say, I'm going to go meet some people and talk about, hey, who you are and what do you do?
Yep.
Just meet them. Go, is this the way I want to go?
So there's one other thing I'd add to that, and this goes back to things I hear from people I talk to all the time. So the normal mantra from veteran advocates is network, do informational interviews, find a mentor, right? And I ask these people because most veterans are actually digital nomads, or they're kind of digital avoiders. Another article I wrote out there, but they don't like to interact, and I don't think it's because they don't like to interact. They have no idea what questions to ask, none.
Mhm.
right? So when you go to a mentor, hey, what do you talk about? They're like, well, I don't know. So there's no framework for this discussion. And I say this because this would kind of lend itself to what you were just saying with the conference, and why I think pre-veteran is valuable, because you got to have a framework for what you're trying to accomplish
Mhm.
before you can actually go talk to people. And then once you know kind of what you're looking for, wow, the networking, the mentoring, the informational interviews become very, very, very solid. And
Mhm.
those could actually become leads, and those can actually become
Yeah,
job opportunities.
yeah, and it's like one of these things where, look, great article the other day talking about Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos in 1998 put $250,000 of his own money into this little company called Google. If he didn't sell any stock, that money today is worth eight and a half. That 250 grand is worth $8.5 billion. And so where am I getting with this? Bezos was a Silicon Valley guy. He meets Sergey and the other dude in a garage, in a friend's garage by happenstance. And they start talking about this idea that they have. It's Google, which is called Google. And he had just failed at something. And he's like, he understood the technology, but ultimately where he got, you think about $8.5 billion, it was his network. It's like he was in an area where he knew some people who knew some people, and nobody was looking for anything. So, and this is what I talk to people about all the time, whether transitioning military people, and I always take their calls. Um, it's like, go build a network, but don't ask for anything. Just what do
Yeah.
you do? What do you do? What's the purpose of it? Why? And you know what? People have more respect for you because you're not asking for anything. You're just saying, what is it? What is it? What does it do? And they'll help you get there, but ultimately they'll help you build your network up. And that's, the network of, you know, I've been around military people all my life. I'm only hanging around military people. That ain't going to help you. That ain't going to help you on the other side. So that doesn't
No,
help you on the other side.
I agree with that. I agree
The
with that.
My next door neighbor in my office complex here is a private equity guy. Private equity guy. He's taken 3 companies public in the last 18 months. He's kind of new to town. He's been here a couple of years, but he knows everybody. I go on a walk with him. We get on the beach and we just walk. And I asked him, I go, how do you know everybody? He goes, well, it's a true story. He sold his company for 800 million bucks. So, and he had to leave town because it was a small town. And everybody kind of knew that he sold him and his partners sold their company for big money. When you have 800 million bucks, you got 800 million people, tug it on your shirt sleeve. Very few have your best interest in mind. So he actually moved out of town. And when he got here, he called up every business leader in town and just said, my name's Joe. I'm involved in some things that look like this. And I hear you got to come. I just want to meet you. He knows everybody. And I sit in
That's
his
awesome.
office all the time. He's like, you need to meet this guy. You need to meet this guy. And I'm embarrassed that I don't know anybody.
This new guy comes in and he knows more people than you, right?
But once again, it comes into the value of building a network. And that's the one thing that they can't teach you. The one thing they can't teach you, the one thing in transition assistance programs should be teaching you 3 years, 4 years before you get out of the military, how to build a network. It's the same thing in the civilian world, how to build your network.
Yep.
Conferences are a great place. Just phone calls to your competitors. Hey, I just want to know you. Why not?
Right.
They'll take that call. So
No, I agree with that. That again, I think the big thing for me when I help people out is getting them to wrap their questions around something. And I totally get your point where if you're just going to learn something, I mean, there can never be anything wrong with that. If you're purposefully trying to find a job, and that's where I'm kind of coming from with my head right now, I think we could do exactly what you're saying if if we could teach them how the private sector works in a very succinct, easily to understand way. And we do that, frankly, in our course. And we talk about the first thing we do is we remove the internal obstacles. The next is we remove the external obstacles. We just told you about some of the internal obstacles. And once they have those identified, we can fill their head with more useful information that they don't fight. Because we talked about them fighting this new information with those things that we talked about. But once you understand simple things like, what is a business unit? What is a program? How do companies make money? Well, they make them from programs, and programs have business units. And the business unit, or the BU, is the engine for any company, which means, and this gets us into the weird transition space again, the researchers out there happen to think that transitioning military members would make great program managers. I think that is the worst idea in the world. Worst idea in the world. I've been in industry now in 3 entry-level business development, executive of North Asia, and now senior individual contributor as a strategy guy. I would be terrified to be a program manager for a no-joke program. I mean, knowing the P&L, again, because we get back to this disconnect of private sector has to make money, public sector does not. It just has to manage a budget. There's a lot of senior leaders like you talk about out there that happen to think those are very similar when they could not be any more different.
Right.
Spending money is easy when you know you're going to get it again. Making money and knowing that you're putting out an expenditure plan or a cost plan after you've made money is a completely different proposition. And once they kind of understand that, though, I mean, the learning really starts to take hold, and they can really kind of wedge themselves and do a really good job. And that's why we see them flourish after a couple of years. But why go through the tumultuous 2-year period, man?
It's crazy. Why? I mean, but that's the one thing that, the one thing I write a lot about it. I blog a lot about it. It's like, start early. No matter who you are, you may love your job. You may never want to leave it, but who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Build your networks up. Yeah. The most powerful thing in the world is someone with knowledge. I mean, when you have knowledge and a network, and no matter what happens, you're like, I love the guys who are like, if my job ended tomorrow, I wouldn't care. I'd go walk across the street to these guys because they'd hire me. They'd hire me a minute. Like, I want you.
Totally.
But that's the whole. It's a good thing. I love what you're doing for the veteran community. It's really needed, but not necessarily just for the veterans. But I think it really helps the business people understand, hey, what's going on in the mind of this person that I'm hiring, and really taking a little bit of a bet on. In a lot of ways. There's a lot of attributes they bring, but it's ultimately making sure that it's a good fit both ways. How do people get a hold of Jason Anderson at PreVeteran?
All right. So the website is preveteran.com. We also have a presence on YouTube and LinkedIn. We have a company page, and then you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Just type into LinkedIn PreVeteran and you'll find us pretty quick. Really appreciate doing this. It's been a great time kind of chatting with you, getting the word out. I'm really glad you were the first one, right? So I look forward to doing some follow-ups in the future when we start getting people through the pipeline. I think it's going to be really interesting where this goes. We'll
start talking about the successes and the things like that. I mean, it's a great, like I said, it's a great thing what you're doing. It's a great thing. But once again, it's an investment that somebody needs to make in themselves. But it's a good one. So cool.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for coming on, Jason.
Absolutely. Thanks. Talk to you next time.
I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of the Aerospace Executive Podcast. You can reach out to me directly, Craig at NorthstarESG.com, or check us out at www.northstaresg.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or on YouTube. Just do a search for Aerospace Executive Podcast. Thanks again. I'm Craig Piven.